A missing mother, an abandoned car hidden deep inside a forest, and a killer who stood face to face with police, smiled, answered their questions, and still walked away like nothing happened. But here's what makes this case truly disturbing. While officers were standing inside his house, talking to him, trying to help him find her, her body was already lying less than a mile away, cold, hidden, and slowly decomposing. Before we go any further, drop your location in the comments. Where are you watching from right now? And what time is it over there? And if you're into real, dark, true crime stories like this, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, because this case only gets more twisted the deeper it goes. It all started with a call, a worried voice, reporting her best friend missing. Crystal had sent a message earlier that morning, telling her boss she was on her way to work. A normal message, nothing unusual, but she never arrived. Her phone suddenly stopped responding. Her car completely vanished. And within hours, something didn't feel right. This wasn't like her. Crystal wasn't reckless. She wasn't the type to disappear without telling anyone. She had children, a family, people depending on her. So when calls started going unanswered, panic slowly began to set in. Then investigators heard something that immediately raised concern. The night before she disappeared, Crystal had gone out to meet a man her daughter barely knew, a man named Matt. But what made it even more unsettling was that Crystal had specifically told her daughter to keep it a secret. She didn't want her ex-boyfriend finding out, because according to her, he was dangerous. Now investigators were looking at a situation that could go in multiple directions. A missing woman, a mysterious date, and a violent ex with a troubling past. Any one of them could be the key, or all of them could be connected. As officers began piecing together her final movements, they focused on the last person she was supposed to meet. They tracked him down, they called him, and what he said next completely changed everything. He denied knowing her. He said he had never met Crystal. He claimed he hadn't even lived in the area for years. At first it sounded like a dead end, another false lead, but something about it didn't sit right. So investigators dug deeper into the account Crystal had been messaging, and what they uncovered was far more disturbing than anyone expected. Every login, every trace, every digital footprint tied to that account pointed back to one place. Not another state, not miles away, but right there, in the same small town where Crystal had disappeared. Which meant one thing: the man she trusted, the man she went out to meet that night, was never who he claimed to be. Someone had been pretending, watching, planning, waiting. And by the time anyone realized what was really going on, Crystal was already gone. By now, investigators knew one thing for sure. Crystal didn't just disappear. She was lured. Someone had created a fake identity, gained her trust, and brought her exactly where they wanted her. But who? And more importantly, why her? To answer that, detectives pulled her phone records and requested emergency location data. What came back immediately narrowed everything down. Her last phone signal didn't come from some random highway or unknown area. It came from a quiet stretch of road, just a few miles away from someone they already knew, her ex-boyfriend. At first it felt like a coincidence, but the more they looked at it, the less it felt like one. So late that night, officers made a decision. They were going to speak to him directly, not casually, not later, right now. When they arrived at his house, something about the atmosphere felt off. Not obvious, not aggressive, just wrong. Still, he opened the door, calm, relaxed, almost too relaxed. He didn't hesitate, didn't panic, didn't even seem surprised to see police standing outside his home in the middle of the night. When they asked about Crystal, he answered without resistance. He claimed he hadn't seen her in days, said she used to come around sometimes, but nothing recent. But then, his story started shifting. Small details didn't line up. Timelines became unclear. What was 2 days ago suddenly turned into maybe yesterday. Subtle inconsistencies, but enough to raise concern. So investigators decided to test something. They showed him the location data. They explained that Crystal's phone had been tracked, and that her last known position placed her just a short distance from his house. For the first time, he paused. Not long, just enough. Then he adjusted, changed his tone, reworked his timeline, tried to make it fit. But something was already broken. Still, despite everything, he did something unexpected. He cooperated. He allowed officers inside, told them to search, look anywhere, check everything. And that's exactly what they did. They walked through every room, checked for signs of struggle, looked for anything that could connect him to her disappearance. But they found nothing. No blood, no evidence, no clear indication of violence. Just a quiet house, and a man who appeared to have nothing to hide. On the surface, it looked clean, too clean. And that was the problem. Because even though there was no evidence inside that house, something about him didn't sit right. Not the way he spoke, not the way he adjusted his story, not the way he stayed so calm under pressure. It felt rehearsed, controlled, like he'd already thought through every possible question before they even asked it. Eventually, with nothing solid to hold him on, officers had no choice. They left, and just like that, the man who would later confess to murder watched them walk away, knowing they were only minutes from discovering the truth. Because less than a mile from that house, hidden deep in the woods, something was waiting to be found. Something that would turn this case into something far darker than anyone expected. Early the next morning, just as the investigation seemed to stall, a call came in. An abandoned vehicle had been found, deep in a wooded area. At first, it didn't seem unusual. Cars get dumped all the time. But the moment the officer ran the plate, everything changed. The vehicle belonged to Crystal. Just like that, the case shifted again. This wasn't a disappearance anymore. This was something else. Backup units were called in immediately. The area was secured, and officers began searching the surroundings. Carefully, methodically, looking for anything, any sign of where she went, any clue of what happened. Then, one of them noticed something. Blood. Faint but visible, staining the leaves nearby. And not far from it, marks on the ground, drag marks, the kind that don't happen by accident. Without hesitation, they followed them, step by step, deeper into the woods. The air changed. Heavy. Silent. Until one of the officers suddenly stopped. Look at this. Hidden under a pile of leaves was a small mound, disturbed earth, roughly shaped, almost like a grave. Backup was called in again. This time, forensic. Because everyone already knew what they were about to find. As they carefully cleared the leaves away, the truth finally surfaced. It was her, Crystal's body, buried just beneath the surface, already showing signs of decomposition. And the moment they saw her condition, one thing became clear. This was no accident. This was deliberate, brutal, personal. Further examination confirmed it. She had been killed. Blunt force trauma and strangulation. Two methods, which meant rage, control, and time. Whoever did this didn't panic. They made sure she was gone. And then they tried to hide it. But they didn't take her far. That was the mistake. Because this location, this exact spot, was less than a mile from the man police had just spoken to hours earlier. The same man who stayed calm. The same man who changed his story. The same man who let them walk through his house, as if he had nothing to hide. But now, everything was different. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was a homicide. And all signs were starting to point in one direction. But what investigators didn't realize yet was just how calculated this man really was. Because even after all of this, even after the body was found, he still believed he could control the story. And what he would do next, no one saw coming. As the body was pulled from the ground, the case instantly shifted into full homicide investigation mode. But what investigators didn't realize yet was that the real danger wasn't over. It was just beginning. Because while detectives were processing the discovery, the man they had questioned just hours earlier was already making his next move. Back at headquarters, officers began building the timeline piece by piece. Crystal's last known message, her meeting with the mysterious Matt, the fake identity, the phone location near her ex's property, and now her body found just a short distance away. Everything was starting to align. But one problem remained. There was still no direct evidence tying him to the murder. So investigators made a decision. They needed leverage. They began speaking with Crystal's family again. And what they heard this time changed everything. Her daughter revealed something they hadn't fully understood before. Crystal had been in an extremely toxic relationship, one filled with violence, control, and repeated threats. There were even hospital records showing past abuse, bruises, injuries, signs of severe physical assault. And according to her family, he had made chilling statements before, saying things like she would pay, that she wouldn't make it out, that her family would end up 6 feet under. Now those words weren't just threats anymore. They were evidence of intent. At the same time, forensic teams continued analyzing the crime scene. And what they discovered added another layer of horror. The burial site wasn't random. It was carefully chosen, hidden enough to delay discovery, but close enough to the suspect's location to suggest confidence. Control. Almost like the killer believed the body would never be found. But the biggest breakthrough came later that night, when digital forensics dug deeper into the fake Matt account. The login data didn't just show location patterns anymore. It showed behavior, consistent access, repeated monitoring, and a pattern that suggested someone was actively maintaining the deception. Not a random catfish, not a one-time scam, but a carefully controlled impersonation designed to lure Crystal out. And every trace of that activity kept circling back to one area, the same region, the same network, the same suspect pool. Now investigators had enough for a major escalation. They began preparing for an arrest. But before they could move, something unexpected happened. At around 5 in the morning, the phone rang. It was him, the suspect, calmly asking to meet. In person, right away. No hesitation, no panic, just a request to talk. And in that moment, investigators knew something had shifted. Because suspects don't usually call police, unless they believe they still control the outcome. And when officers agreed to meet him, they had no idea they were about to walk straight into the final twist of the case. The next morning, investigators returned to meet him. This time there was no resistance, no argument, no denial. He simply sat down and said he wanted to talk. At first it felt like another attempt to control the story, another version of events designed to protect himself. But within minutes, everything changed. He paused, looked down, and then confessed. He admitted meeting Crystal that night. He admitted an argument broke out, and he admitted she never left alive. According to him, things escalated quickly. What started as tension turned into something he couldn't control. Afterward, he panicked. He made a decision he thought would save him. He moved her body. He tried to hide evidence. He attempted to erase every trace of what happened. But it was already too late. Investigators listened in silence. Not because they were shocked, he confessed, but because of how calculated everything had been up to that point. The fake identity, the messages, the careful deception, it all now formed a clear pattern. Crystal hadn't randomly disappeared. She had been targeted, lured, and manipulated into a situation designed to trap her. When the confession ended, there was no dramatic reaction, no shouting, no chaos. Just silence. He was taken into custody immediately, handcuffed and escorted out without resistance. In the weeks that followed, charges were filed and the case was officially closed. But the story left behind a disturbing truth. Sometimes the most dangerous people are not the ones who act violently in public, but the ones who stay calm, composed, and convincing while hiding everything in plain sight. Crystal's case was no longer a mystery. It had answers, but none that brought peace. And it left one final question. How many others are still out there, waiting to be uncovered? Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to his channel, because Stories like this aren't just for entertainment only, but to spread awareness all over the world. Thanks for watching, family.